terrors. And YAHAWAH is the son of the king of terrors. Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you, brother. That's right. Yes, black workers were essential to Henry Ford's production, particularly during the 1920s and 1930s when Ford was the largest industrial employer of African Americans in the U.S. By 1929, 8% of workers at the Rouge plant were black, with many employed in the foundry and via church connections providing labor that drove Ford's assembly line success. Yet we never hear about that. You never hear about that. Again, that's why that white boy is so proud of what he just said. Right? Let's bring that back. Let's hear that again.
Sitting in, white boys did it. That's right, motherfucker. NASCAR, fucking drag racing, the assembly line, Henry Ford.
The assembly line, Henry Ford. But what does the history say? Let's read it. With many employed in the foundry and via church connections, talking about so-called blacks, providing labor that drove Ford's assembly line success. Yet we don't hear anything about that. Key early figure, William Perry, was the first African-American hired by Henry Ford, started in 1914 after previously working with him in a lumber business. So Henry Ford took to this guy. And like the pastor said, I believe it. Henry Ford, even though he looked like a so-called white man, he had to be a Jake. He was the one that cursed out the so-called Jew. All right, he wrote a book called The International Jew. In that book, he was cursing out the so-called Jews, how wicked they are. Yeah, he did say NASCAR. That was a great NASCAR was a great contribution to society. Oh, look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Let's read that. The meek are loved. I guess I'm being biased because I'm not into NASCAR. That don't move me. The meek are loved. Yes, African Americans were involved in the moonshine and bootlegging industry, which included modifying cars to outrun federal agents. So-called blacks came up with it during the prohibition era and beyond. While the popular often cited narrative of NASCAR's origins often focuses on white Southern drivers, African Americans played a central yet frequently overlooked. You starting to see a pattern here with us? All right, all the inventions, the phone at the time on that one, all the inventions that we came up with that actually enhances society, we were forgotten. Now, why is that? But there's a spiritual reason for that, because this is Esau's society. This is Esau's kingdom. All right? So he's going to get the credit in his own society, in his own kingdom. See? African Americans played a central yet frequently overlooked role in distilling and transporting moonshine. Yeah, Henry Ford was of Irish and Belgian descent. His father, William Ford, was an Irish immigrant from County Cork. So yeah, he was a Jake. He was a Jake, even though he looked like a so-called white man. You got so-called Irish that look like that really are so-called black people that look like so-called white people. Yeah, we understand that. You got a sister right now in here, Ellen Irish. Why is she in here? Because her spirit identifies with so-called black people. That's why. Let's read some more. Employment opportunities. Ford was the first major company to hire black workers in large numbers. Look at that. Oh yeah, William Ford was a poor Irish immigrant. Yeah, that's one of the rites of passage of being a Jake. You're going to be poor because this ain't our society. This ain't our kingdom. Ford was the first major company to hire black workers in large numbers, often providing equal pay to white workers. By 1931, Ford wages supported 20% of Detroit's African American population. Check that out. I never even knew that. Community connection. Ford worked with influential Detroit black ministers such as Reverend Robert L. Braby, who acted as personal agents to hire workers during the Great Migration. Role in production, while black workers were heavily concentrated in the most dangerous jobs, such as the foundry and forge, they were also employed as skilled machinists, electricians, and in various other positions. So it wasn't all Ford, man. And Ford himself could very well could have been a Jake. As a matter of fact, I'm positive he was a Jake, like Apostle R.B. bringing up. While Ford provided critical jobs during a time of limited opportunities, the work environment included segregated job assignments and limited advancement, with black workers primarily restricted from rising to executive levels. I'm pretty sure Ford didn't mind promoting them, but they didn't want to see a so-called black only go but so far. Which, again, that goes back to the scriptures. The phone had to chime on that one. So let's get back to the list. What else did he talk about? So we dealt with assembly line. Airplane. Yeah, let's play it. He mentions the airplane.
Holy fucking Davidson! You ever been in a fucking airplane? That's right. White boys again.
White boys again. The airplane. Let's deal with the airplane. Charles F. Page, a black inventor and formerly enslaved man from Louisiana, designed and patented a double balloon airship. And by the way, he actually beat the Wright brothers by a few days, I think it was. Charles Frederick Page. You never hear about this guy. With his patent application filed in 1903 and granted in 1906, shortly before or around the same time as the Wright brothers' patent, because flight is attributed to the Wright brothers. What about this guy here? By the way, it says not taught in schools. That's how bad we are, man. We're the ones that are badass. And Esau knows it. He knows it. He's just trying to, don't try to pump yourself up, baby boy. Inside joke. Shortly before, around the same time as the Wright brothers' patent, while Page built a full-scale model, it was stolen in 1904, preventing him from achieving the same public success as the Wrights. Look at that. Look at that. This video discusses the incredible story of Charles Page and his invention. Look at that. Charles Frederick Page, 1864. Born in slavery in Louisiana, Page was a self-taught inventor. The invention Page designed a bi-ballooned flyable airship, which he worked on in the early 1900s. Yet flight is given credit to the Wright brothers. The stolen model, let's read that. Excuse me. Matter of fact, let's read this here. Patent timeline. Page filed for his patent on April 24th, 1903, and was granted the patent for his airship on April 10th, 1906. The Wright brothers filed their patent in 1903 and received it on May 22nd, 1906. So he beat them. The stolen model. In 1904, Page built a full-scale model and sent it to the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis. But it was stolen in transit, which effectively ended his efforts. Yeah, I remember watching the video on that. That broke him. He was broken by that. He never really recovered from that, because his whole life was spent into designing that model. And he was hoping it would take him out of poverty, this guy on Page. I remember watching that, man. I was getting mad. But then you get mad, but then you understand that that's the curses. Goes back to the curses. Matter of fact, somebody put Deuteronomy 28, the Lord shall smite thee with madness. in everything you set your hand to do, roughly paraphrasing that scripture. The stolen model, 1904 Page built a full-scale model and sent it to the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, but it was stolen in transit, which effectively ended his efforts to compete with the Wright brothers. He would have beat them too, which he did beat them, it's just not known. Recognition in 2024, historical marker was placed in Pineville, Louisiana to honor his contributions to aviation, the so-called black. How about that? Uh-oh. Sound like you got something that Meek all love. I bet he uses GPS in this car. Let me guess. I bet you Jake came up with that. Let's see what he got here. Hold up. Got to start it. Dr. Gladys Westborn, 1930s, is a black female mathematician who was pioneering work in the 1960s and 70s on satellite geodesy, provided the crucial mathematical modeling of the Earth's shape, which is essential for the accuracy of modern GPS. She was inducted into the Air Force Space Hall of Fame in 2018. Didn't they make a movie about that? I think they did. Again, the so-called black woman. Yeah, I bet you he does use, because he don't look that smart, so I bet you he does use GPS. Let's read this here. While the Wright brothers are generally credited with the first sustained, controlled, powered, heavier than air flight on December 17, 1903, Page is recognized as a significant early black inventor in aviation. Yeah, she started. She was one of the actresses that started that movie, Taraji. There's a video of this man invented the airship, Mr. Charles F. Page. A black aviator soared the sky before the Wright brothers. Ooh, that's a cut. And this guy here, let's bring him out of the cage. This guy here, boasting about the white boys came up with flight.
Holy fucking Davidson! You ever been in a fucking airplane? That's right, white boys again.
Wrong. Guess he never heard of a man over here. Guess he never heard of Charles Frederick Page. That's why in the title I put he's not a student of history. This Mama Luke over here. Anyway, let's go to what's the next one there? Airplane, railroads, highways, bridges. He's going to mention that. Let's hear.
Railroads, highways, bridges.
Railroads, highways, bridges. Let's get the next one. Black Americans' contribution to the American highway system. And the hits just keep on coming. Published February 13, 2025, black people played a pivotal role in the development of the United States highway system, both directly and indirectly. Though their work as laborers and advocates and entrepreneurs, through their work as laborers, advocates, and entrepreneurs. Although the contributions of black Americans to infrastructure and transportation have often been overlooked. You see the pattern, you keep seeing the pattern of our work being overlooked. That's the scripture, man. That's the scripture where it says, who made no account of his labors. That's the scripture. Uh-oh, you got some more. I bet you he watches and loves ice hockey. Oh, I know you got the stats on that. Let's read that. Hold on. The Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, established in 1895. And I bet you I bet you they were more entertaining to watch than them white boys when they be playing hockey. It's just like basketball. Remember when the white boys were playing basketball and the shit was all tawny? It didn't take off until so-called blacks got up in there and they were doing all those amazing dunks and those amazing moves. You know? Again, we're the salt of the earth, baby. We're the salt of the earth. Okay? Anything we take over, we take it to the next level. Okay? That's a fact. The Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, established in 1895, is in Nova Scotia by descendants of American slaves. Look at that. Never heard of it. Played a crucial role in modernizing ice hockey by introducing the slap shot. There you go. The slap shot. That came from Jake. Yep, I've heard of him. Granville T. Woods. I've heard of him. Known as the Black Edison. Yep, significantly advanced electric railway technology by inventing and patenting crucial components for the third rail system around 1901 to 1904. Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, I remember his name, Granville. Let's get back to this. So we even played a part in the American highway system. According to the contributions of Black Americans to the infrastructure and transportation have often been overlooked in mainstream historical narratives. They were essential to building the nation's roads, highways, and transportation networks. Their efforts helped shape the interstate highway system and other significant roads that support commerce, travel, and national connectivity. There are several key ways that Black Americans helped develop the highway system. Labor on road construction projects. I'm just going to read the highlights. Civil War era and early road building. Our people had a hand in that. Labor on the interstate highway system. Our people had a hand in that. They included both skilled and unskilled workers who laid asphalt, paved roads, and built bridges. So, Black men were often assigned to some of the most physically demanding jobs in the construction of the highways, often at lower wages than their white counterparts. Why are we not surprised? But again, this is their society. This is their kingdom. So we understand it. We that have this knowledge is truth. We understand it. But we're going to get them in the kingdom, man. All this wickedness that's been done to us, we're going to get them in the kingdom. Where are they going to go?